Let's cut straight through the bullshit and make this crystal fucking clear. Plain as day, Sega in no way, shape, or form is interested in re-entering the console race at all. They are not currently producing any hardware for a current or even next generation console. There is no Dreamcast 2. All this shit has been fabricated and exaggerated. You've been bullshitted, you've been lied to. This is not happening at all. Period. There you go. I've been seeing so many people go and post link after link after link after link, and nobody has been following that little breadcrumb trail, that electronic breadcrumb trail, to see that most of this stems from a petition saying that Sega should go into production of the Sega Dreamcast 2. And no matter what you may want from a company as big as Sega, no matter your admiration, your undying love for this company that has been a trailblazer, a trendsetter within the video game market, them doing this, frankly, would be career suicide. The reason why? Most people are viewing this as, Sega, man, it would be so great if they did that. But you have nostalgia goggles on, rune-tinted glasses that are making you see Sega for what they used to be and not for what they are right now. Sega, in the 80s, 90s, and part of 2000, was one of the biggest video game companies in the entire world. They produced not only some of the most innovative video game franchises, but they took great strides to push the console market to where it is today. That's not Sega now. Sega now hardly warrants and even struggles with being a third-party video game developer and publisher. In-house, they barely produce any video games whatsoever. If you look at the paltry amount of titles that they put out between 2015, let alone have announced for 2016, and then compare that to when they first publicly went out and said, we're a third-party video game manufacturer right now, we'll be producing our games for all given platforms. It is like night and day, laughably so, and depressingly so. This isn't a company that could make a console. Right now, the console market is oversaturated. Whether you know it or not, or even paying any fucking attention, another console being added to the mix not only is unnecessary, but would just cause an even greater divide for people and would end up risking and a ton of money for Sega that they'd obviously lose out in. And this late into this console generation? Fuck out of here. Think about it. Any consumer, any video game fan, any video game developer and publisher has a great amount of options set forth right in front of them that they can go produce their video games for, release their video games for, that people can go and buy said video games and enjoy them on whatever platform it was that they decided this is the one I'm going to stick with. Then you're going to have Sega in the mix. Sega would be able to make way more money producing games for all those platforms. Just right now, they barely make any. You know, like I had said, last year to this year to next year, it's like night and day. I've said time and again the amount of franchises that they have under their umbrella, let alone them working alongside Atlas, they haven't been producing much. I mean, Atlas is fucking awesome, but they haven't been utilizing their talents to go and translate and bring many of their games that have been exclusive to Japan outside of Japan. And it's been proven over and over again that Sega's made way more money outside Japan than they have in Japan on their console releases, and hell, even on their PC releases. But you can't go and lead a fucking horse to water. You can't. You know, you can try, but you can't. Not in this instance. But them making a Dreamcast 2, look, I love the Dreamcast, and I thought that that was the best way for them to exit the console market on a high note. They got to put that period on the exclamation point and say, that's what the fuck we ended with. One of the best damn systems ever. I love the shit out of the Dreamcast. But them making a Dreamcast 2, the closest thing that you are ever going to get to a Dreamcast 2 is if somebody is able to make a clone console of the Dreamcast and make that shit in high definition, which is really what we need. But considering the fact that emulation really isn't there, and they'd have to go and figure out, you know, or any of the copyrights still in place for the hardware, for all the shit that was under the hood of the Dreamcast, there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through to be able to do something like that legally, and then put it out there and turn a profit, let alone do it in such a manner that isn't going to piss off the likes of Sega. Unless, of course, somebody brings it forth to Sega and they still think, hey, that's actually not a bad idea because people still make Dreamcast games right now. There are still developers out there that make games for them. Hell, I just got Pure Solar HD for the Dreamcast. Just as an example, I even got a shooter for the Dreamcast. And there's a couple other games out there that I was checking out. People still make games for, but re-entering the console industry? Nah. I mean, when the likes of Nintendo is having trouble competing with Microsoft and Sony when they're struggling, what the fuck do you think Sega's going to do when they re-enter? You know, if Sega had done a magical 180 and was just fucking rolling in tons of cash, you know, they had franchise after franchise, and all they were doing was expanding their operations, and their business was just booming and flourishing like nobody's fucking business, I might understand somebody getting the idea that they could potentially be interested in, yet again, entering the console industry, but they're not. I mean, Sega's taken so many chances. You figure, here's some information most people aren't aware of. You know that Sega went to Sony a long-ass time ago about them shacking up and working on a system together? You know that they also went to Microsoft to go and do that. Though the Microsoft deal panned out at least marginally, because they had the exclusivity deal where they were like, hey, you can go and have all these games that they were originally working on with their Dreamcast, but then just had them ported over to the Xbox, considering that they're not all that different. The Xbox is like a much stronger Dreamcast. That's kind of the truth of it. And one of the reasons why the original Xbox was so fucking awesome. But, you know, they got Panzer Dragoon Orta, they got Shenmue 2, they got Gun Valkyrie, they got Crazy Taxi 3, they got a ton of titles out of the whole thing. Jet Set Radio Future, but after that, they started putting games on PlayStation 2, onto the GameCube. We got Skies of Arcadia Legends. That was fucking amazing. We got the Super Monkey Ball franchise. A brand new IP. Fuck yeah, that's pretty awesome. But now we have to look at what they are now. Dreamcast Soup is just not going to happen. All those websites that you've been reading up on? Nah, man. That's a bunch of bullshit. And you shouldn't be all that surprised. On the internet, people are trying to go and drive web traffic to them by any means necessary. They don't give a shit whatsoever if it's going to cost them their reputation, because they probably didn't have a preset reputation to begin with, or else they wouldn't be lying. This is just one of those rare instances where it seems like it could be true, it could be, right? Right, and you saw the mock-up images that people were producing. You know, oh, this is what the Dreamcast 2 will look like. I had people completely and utterly convinced, even personal friends. I had to go and set them straight. When I was streaming on Twitch, I'm sitting there live and I'm just playing games, having a good time, people were asking me about it. When I was on Twitter, plenty of people were posting shit on there. When I was on Facebook, people were posting shit on there. I just kept seeing this over and over and over again. I was like, fuck it, I'll just come forward and tell you right here, right in front of the camera, it's not going to happen. This is not the Sega that you used to know. We can just hope that they're going to get better. I mean, they are in production of making, you know, new Yakuza games. I'm like, hey, that's pretty cool. They got a new Phantasy Star Online coming to PS4, so hopefully that reaches outside of Japan. That'd be fantastic. But there's just not much coming out of the Sega camp. There isn't. You know, some of the 3D offerings of their old school games that they released for the 3DS on the eShop, I thought that was fantastic. Would rather have had them on a physical cartridge, but, you know, I'm a stickler for that kind of thing. But truth is, not much new. And if they don't have a vast catalog, and if they aren't going and building their empire bigger and bigger and bigger, guess what? That means that they obviously couldn't chance something like this because it would sink the ship, and soon enough, they'd have to go and right up to the chopping block and place their neck directly across it. But the Dreamcast always lived for years and years in my heart as one of the coolest fucking consoles I ever got to play. Still remember getting House of Dead 2 as my first game for the system, loving that a whole bunch, and the tons and tons and tons of games on it that meant the world to me and still do today. So if anything, I just want to see Sega port those games more often. Grandia 2 actually made its way onto Steam. That was kind of badass. Hopefully it's going to be going on console. And yes, I know that's AIM Arts, it's not actually Sega, but I just want to see those companies go and start pushing all that shit everywhere. Capcom had a lot of good games on there. Maybe they ought to be thinking about that. That'd be fucking bitchin'. Anyway, this is AlphaOmegaSin, as always, nerds, nerdettes, and gamers game. The fuck on! Peace.